My brother forged our father's will and tried to steal the house, so I let him dig his own grave, then took everything back in court. My name's Alex. I'm 31, single, and up until last year, I was living a quiet, simple life working overseas. Nothing glamorous, I was a logistics coordinator for a supply chain company based out of Singapore. The job paid well, and I liked it. I had a routine. A small apartment, a gym down the block, a few close friends, and a call home every Sunday. Home was Buffalo, New York. That's where I grew up. That's where my dad lived, in the same house he built himself when I was 6 years old. He was a retired construction foreman, the kind of guy who fixed everything himself and never hired help unless it was legally required. He raised me and my older brother, Jake, mostly on his own after our mom passed away when I was 10. We didn't have much, but we had stability, and we had him. My father was a good man. Tough, honest, and fair. Jake was the opposite. He'd always been the kind of person who found the shortcut, even if it meant stepping on someone else to get there. Growing up, he was the loud one, the kid who broke rules and made excuses. He coasted through life on charm and a permanent victim complex. If something went wrong, it was always someone else's fault, a teacher, a boss, the system, me. Anyone but him. After college, I took a consulting job overseas. Logistics and infrastructure, the stuff most people find boring. But I liked the structure. The predictability. No surprises, no chaos. Far from home, I found peace. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without bracing for a storm. I didn't visit often. Once every couple of years, mostly. But I kept in touch with Dad. Weekly calls, birthday cards, emails with photos from my latest project in Bangkok, Manila, Jakarta. He was proud. Said I was the one who made it out. Jake stayed. Drifted from job to job, lived in Dad's basement rent-free, always one beer away from some excuse about why the world had it out for him. Still, Dad never gave up on him. He wouldn't. That's just the kind of man he was. And then last year, I got the call. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon in Singapore. I was in the middle of sorting out a shipping delay when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail. I wish I had. It was my dad's neighbor, Mr. Kellerman. He didn't waste time with small talk. "Alex, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this," he said. "But your father, he collapsed. In the garage. Paramedics got here fast, but it was too late." For a second, I didn't understand the words. I was staring at a spreadsheet on my monitor, listening to this old man's voice echo through my earbuds like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "What do you mean too late?" I asked. But he didn't say it again. He didn't have to. I left work without saying a word. I don't even remember shutting my laptop. Just grabbing my passport and stuffing a week's worth of clothes into a carry-on. I was on the next flight out, 37 minutes after booking it from my phone in the back of a cab. I'd done this flight before. Normally it felt long. This time, it felt endless. 14 hours of sitting there, surrounded by strangers and crying babies, while my brain just shut down. No tears. No panic. Just a tight, cold knot in my chest that wouldn't go away. Somewhere over the Pacific, it hit me, I didn't even know how to cry anymore. When I landed in New York, it was dark. Cold. February had that bite in the air that goes straight to your bones. As I stepped outside baggage claim, there he was. Jake. Standing next to Dad's old truck, hands buried in the pockets of a weather-beaten army surplus jacket. Same shaggy hair, same stained jeans. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week, eyes sunken, skin pale and tight. We hadn't seen each other in nearly 3 years. He gave me a half-hearted wave and a lopsided grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey. Hey," I said. We stood there for a second, neither of us moving. Then he clapped me on the shoulder, like we were teammates or something. It was the kind of hug you give someone when you don't know if you're supposed to. Not warmth, just obligation. "You get my texts?" he asked as we climbed into the truck. "Yeah. I figured you'd fly back as soon as you could. Dad would have wanted that." I didn't answer. He drove in silence for a while, the heater rattling and sputtering through rusted vents. The truck still smelled like Dad's cologne, Old Spice and sawdust. It hit me harder than the call ever did. Jake finally broke the silence. "I already arranged everything. Funeral's tomorrow. I picked out the casket, talked to Pastor Owens. Got him the plot next to Mom." "You did all that?" "Yeah," he said, glancing at me. "Didn't want you to have to deal with it after that flight." That caught me off guard. Jake wasn't known for being proactive. Especially not with anything resembling responsibility. "I appreciate that," I said, cautiously. He nodded. "No problem. It's what he would have wanted." We passed the gas station where Dad used to take us for Slurpees after Little League games. The church. The diner. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. I moved into the house, Jake added suddenly. Just for now. You know, while we sort things out. Sort what out? I asked. He shrugged. Stuff. You know, the estate, the paperwork, all that crap. I looked over at him. Something in his tone was off. The words were normal, but the way he said them, flat, rehearsed. Like he was reading lines from a script he didn't believe. That was the moment my gut started whispering, something's not right. But I ignored it. Because Dad had just died. Because I was jet-lagged and freezing and grieving. Because Jake was my brother. I assumed he meant well. I should have known better. The funeral was a blur. Cold wind, heavy clouds, the occasional flurry of snow drifting down like the sky couldn't decide whether it wanted to mourn or not. The cemetery was nearly empty, just a dozen people, mostly neighbors and a couple of Dad's old coworkers who'd managed to stick around through retirement. No cousins. No extended family. Just Jake and me standing at opposite ends of the casket like the last two surviving members of a broken battalion. Pastor Owen spoke softly. Too softly. I couldn't focus on the words. My eyes were locked on the casket, dark oak, polished, too perfect for a man who always said, I'd rather be buried in my work boots than waste money on a shiny box. Apparently Jake hadn't remembered that part. I felt numb. Not the kind that comes from grief, I wasn't there yet. It was the kind that comes from being surrounded by people who don't know how to look at you. Everyone kept glancing at Jake, then at me, like they were trying to figure out which one of us was in charge now. Jake played the part well. He shook hands, accepted condolences, even managed a few tears when they lowered Dad into the ground. I stood beside him, stiff and quiet, watching the dirt pile beside the hole grow smaller with every shovelful. That's when the memories started creeping in, uninvited. Jake, age 15, pinning me to the garage wall because I told Dad he'd skipped school. Jake, 17, throwing my backpack into the lake behind our house during a family picnic, laughing while I cried, then telling Dad I was just being too sensitive. Jake, 22, borrowing my car and returning it with a dented bumper and an empty tank, swearing he didn't do it and calling me a psycho for asking about it. I glanced at him now, standing there in a too big black coat he probably borrowed from Dad's closet, face calm, voice low as he spoke to Pastor Owens. He looked like a man in mourning. But I'd seen that look before. Jake always knew how to wear the right face for the moment. When we were kids, it was the innocent, I didn't do it, look. As teens, it became the, why are you trying to ruin my life, snarl. As adults, it shifted into something colder, something that asked for forgiveness before you even realized you'd been hurt. At the reception in the church basement, he handed me a cup of coffee. Black. Just how I liked it. That, somehow, pissed me off more than anything else. You okay? He asked, settling beside me at a folding table. I nodded. Just tired. Yeah, he said, sipping from his own cup. It's a lot, huh? I watched him for a moment. His hands weren't shaking. His eyes weren't red. There was something rehearsed about the whole thing. Thanks for handling everything, I said. You didn't have to. He looked at me, smile fading just slightly. Well. I kind of did. Someone had to. There it was. That subtle dig. The suggestion that I was the one who left. That he was the one who stayed. That he carried the burden while I lived it up overseas. I let it slide. Dad left a will, he added, almost casually. I figured, I said. He updated it last year. That made me look at him. I didn't hear anything about that. He shrugged. He said he wanted to simplify things. Since you were gone, he thought it'd be easier if I handled the estate. Handled how? Jake took another sip of coffee. He left everything to me. I stared at him. Everything? He nodded. House. Truck. Accounts. Said it was just more practical. My pulse ticked up. Not from shock, from confirmation. My gut had been right. Did he tell you that directly? I asked. Yeah. We talked about it last summer. I hadn't been home that summer. Work had kept me away. Dad hadn't mentioned anything in our calls. Jake stood up, patting me on the shoulder like he was consoling me. I've got all the paperwork. We'll go through it tomorrow. No rush. He walked away, blending into the small crowd like it was just another Sunday gathering. Like he hadn't just dropped a nuclear bomb into the middle of my life. And me? I sat there, coffee cooling in my hand, and thought about the last conversation I had with Dad, 2 weeks before he died. He'd asked about my work. Asked if I was saving. Told me, like always, you've got a good head on your shoulders, son. Proud of you. Not once did he mention giving everything to Jake. And I knew then, with absolute certainty, that Jake was lying. That night, I barely slept. Jake had offered me the guest room, but everything about the house felt wrong now. Like it had shifted an inch to the left while I was gone, familiar walls, familiar furniture, but none of it sitting quite right. Maybe it was just grief. Maybe it was something else. At 3 a.m., I found myself sitting at Dad's kitchen table in the dark, staring at the spot where he used to read the newspaper every morning, black coffee in one hand, pen in the other, circling tools he didn't need from the hardware store flyer. I'd watched him do it every visit. He wasn't a man who changed routines. Not easily. Updated the will last summer. He would have said something. By the time the sun came up, I was dressed and out the door. I didn't bother waking Jake. I didn't even leave a note. Instead, I drove into town and walked straight into the office of Paul R. Manning, attorney at law. Mr. Manning was Dad's lawyer for over a decade. A sharp, balding man who looked like he slept in his suit and talked like every word cost extra. But he liked Dad. Always had. He was surprised to see me. "Alex," he said, standing up behind his cluttered desk. "I was wondering when you'd show up. I'm sorry for your loss. Your father was a good man." I nodded. "Thanks. I'm trying to figure things out." Jake said Dad updated his will last year. Left everything to him. Manning frowned. "That's strange. I was never contacted about a new will." "You have the old one." "I do," he said, opening a cabinet and pulling out a thick file. "Signed, notarized, witnessed, dated April 2018. Your father left the estate to be split evenly between you and Jake. The house, the vehicle, and a joint account were all to be divided. His pension and retirement funds had their own named beneficiaries, but everything else was 50-50. I stared at the folder. Jake said there was a new one. "If there was, he didn't file it through me," Manning said, slowly. "And that's a red flag, Alex. Very few people draft legal wills without an attorney. It happens, but it's uncommon. And if it's not properly witnessed, it can be challenged. Easily. What would I need to prove it's fake? Handwriting samples. Witness statements. A copy of the new document, ideally before Jake knows you're questioning it." "I can get that," I said. Manning nodded. "Let me know when you have it." "And Alex?" "Yeah." He lowered his voice. "If he forged your dad's will, don't let it slide." I left the office with the original will, a notarized copy in a sealed envelope, and drove around for an hour. My brain was spinning. Jake had lied to my face. Again. I shouldn't have been surprised. This was the same guy who used to steal money from Dad's wallet and blame it on me. Who once borrowed my social security number to open a cell phone plan when he was 19 and ruined my credit for 2 years. But this was worse. This was Dad's legacy. When I got back to the house, Jake was in the living room watching TV, his legs stretched out on Dad's recliner like he owned the place. "You disappeared early," he said without looking away from the screen. "Had to clear my head." He nodded. "Understandable. Tough day yesterday." "I was thinking we should go over the will today," I said, keeping my voice even. "You said you had the paperwork." Jake paused. Just a half second. "Most people wouldn't notice. But I did." "Yeah. It's in Dad's desk. I'll get it later." "No rush, man. You just got in." "I'd rather see it now," I said. His jaw tensed, but he smiled. "Sure thing." He left the room, and I listened to his footsteps creak down the hall to Dad's bedroom, now his bedroom, apparently. A few minutes later, he came back with a single sheet of paper. Typed. No letterhead. No legal stamp. Just Dad's name at the top in bold and a short list of sentences outlining Jake as the sole inheritor. The signature at the bottom looked off. It was Dad's name, sure, but shakier than usual. Like someone had traced it slowly and carefully, or like it had been copied from memory. "No witnesses?" I asked. "He didn't think it was necessary," Jake said. "It was just between us. Private." I nodded, keeping my expression blank. "Can I make a copy?" "Yeah, sure." I took it to the kitchen and snapped 3 pictures with my phone before running it through the printer Dad had tucked under the cabinet. Jake didn't follow me. He didn't even ask to see the copy. He was too confident. Too sure I'd roll over like I used to. But that version of me, the quiet kid who took the blame, who let him push and lie and cheat, that version died with Dad. Over the next few days, I stayed calm. Polite. I made coffee. I cooked breakfast. I even helped Jake clear out the garage, sorting through Dad's tools and old boxes of forgotten parts. But every night, after Jake went to bed, I turned the guest room into a war room. I compared the forged will to birthday cards Dad had written me over the years. I dug through kitchen drawers until I found an old checkbook with his actual signature on it. The handwriting didn't match. The pressure was different. The flow, off. And the date? August 12th of last year. Dad was in and out of the hospital all that month. I pulled up the emails and texts he'd sent me during that time, short, scattered, filled with typos. He'd been on blood thinners and muscle relaxants. He wasn't in any state to be rewriting his will. I also reached out to a friend from high school, Maria, who now worked in the county clerk's office. I asked if a new will had been filed through probate. She called me the next morning. Nothing new on record since 2018, she said. Only one will, filed through Manning's office. Exactly as I suspected. I started taking careful notes, dates, signatures, inconsistencies, everything. I didn't have enough to go to court yet, but I was getting close. I just needed one more thing, a witness. Someone who could verify Dad's state during that supposed update. I found her completely by accident. I was running errands when I stopped by the corner store where Dad used to buy his cigarettes and Sunday lottery tickets. The clerk, a woman in her 50s named Shirley, recognized me instantly. Alex. Oh, sweetheart. I'm so sorry about your dad, she said, grabbing my hand with a look of real grief. Thanks. It's been a week. I saw him just a few days before it happened, she said, shaking her head. He looked tired. Said your brother had him running all over town, trying to fix something with the bank. My ears perked up. What kind of fix? Oh, I don't know, Hon, just said Jake was driving him crazy. Asked if we had a notary on staff, which we don't. Said he needed one, real quick. That's the last time I saw him. Do you remember when that was? Second week of August. I remember because my grandbaby was born that Tuesday. August 12th. The same day the fake will was supposedly signed. I thanked her and left with a racing pulse. Jake tried to get Dad's will notarized at a gas station, and failed. That meant he probably forged it later. Alone. Back at the house, I printed everything out, the texts, the bank records, the old will, the forged one. I organized it into a file thick enough to drop with a satisfying thump on any lawyer's desk. Meanwhile, Jake was getting bolder. He started calling it my house when talking to friends on the phone. He joked about renovating the spare bedroom I was sleeping in. Once, he walked in without knocking while I was shaving, leaned against the doorframe, and said, you know, I bet I could rent this room out for $600 a month. He thought it was funny. He always thought hurting people was funny, as long as he was the one doing it. One night, I heard him on the phone with someone, laughing. Yeah, bro's back from Asia or wherever the hell he's been. Probably looking for a handout. He's not getting one. Another time, he made a snide comment about how I ditched Dad and only came crawling back now that there was something to inherit. I let it all slide. Because while he was busy puffing his chest and making passive-aggressive remarks, I was scheduling an appointment with Mr. Manning to file the legal challenge. And the moment everything was ready, copies notarized, timeline documented, statements collected, I handed the file to Manning, who looked over the contents, nodded once, and said, we've got him. It took less than 3 weeks for the hearing to be scheduled. The court was small, a single-floor building downtown with plastic chairs and buzzing fluorescent lights. Jake didn't even show up with a lawyer. Just walked in wearing a wrinkled button-down and his usual smug expression, like this was just a formality. He didn't even glance at me. When the judge entered, everyone stood. I didn't look at Jake. I looked at the file in front of me. I'd memorized it by now, every date, every statement, every tiny flaw in that forged will he'd so proudly waved in my face. The judge called the case. Petitioner, Alex Carter, contesting the validity of a last will and testament filed by the respondent, Jake Carter. Jake stepped forward and cleared his throat. Your Honor, the will is real. My father gave me everything because I stayed. My brother left. The judge raised an eyebrow. Let's stick to the facts, Mr. Carter. Do you have legal representation? Jake shrugged. Don't need one. It's simple. It wasn't. Manning stood beside me and began laying out the case with calm precision. The original will, filed and witnessed through the appropriate legal channels in 2018. The new will, undated, unnotarized, no witnesses, submitted only after the decedent's death. The handwriting analysis, confirming inconsistencies with known legal documents and personal letters. Then came the kicker, Dad's hospital records and prescriptions from the exact week Jake claimed he signed the new will. He was heavily sedated, Your Honor, Manning said, placing the chart on the judge's desk. The attending physician noted confusion, slow motor response, and no ability to sign forms without assistance. Jake tried to interrupt. He told me he wanted to change it. The judge didn't even look up. Did he say that in front of witnesses? Jake hesitated. No. But he meant it. What you believe he meant is not legally binding, the judge replied, flipping through the records. Do you have any evidence that supports the legitimacy of this document? Jake opened his mouth. Then closed it. I stared straight ahead. The judge exhaled through his nose and leaned forward. Then I'll be clear, the court finds the August document invalid. The estate will be distributed according to the last known and properly filed will, the 2018 version. Silence. Then the sound of a gavel. It was done. Jake didn't say a word as we left the courtroom. Not when the judge explained that submitting a forged will was grounds for a criminal investigation. Not when Manning reminded him that trying to transfer ownership of the house illegally would need to be reversed, immediately. Jake didn't go to jail. Not right away, at least. But the court's ruling had teeth, and once the judge declared the forged will invalid, everything started unraveling fast. The house, Dad's house, was legally mine. Jake was given 30 days to vacate, effective immediately. When I came by with the court officer to serve the notice, he refused to open the door. Just shouted through it that I was a traitor, that Dad would have been ashamed of me. Maybe that line would have stung years ago. But not anymore. In the end, he didn't even fight it. He moved out 3 days before the deadline, leaving behind a pile of dirty laundry, 5 empty beer cans, and the same cracked recliner he'd claimed as his throne. I found a cigarette burn in the carpet, 3 holes punched in the bedroom drywall, and a half-finished letter on the kitchen counter that just said, "This isn't over." But it was. Over the next few months, word got out. That's the thing about small towns, people talk. And when they heard Jake tried to cheat me out of the will, to forge our dad's signature and file it through back channels, the sympathy he tried to milk evaporated. He lost his part-time job at the auto shop. The owner, who'd been a friend of Dad's, said he didn't want that kind of person handling customer keys. The girl he'd been dating, or using, depending on who you asked, stopped coming around. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she moved out of his apartment and took the dog with her. Jake started sleeping in his truck. Or couch surfing, depending on who would still take him in. Eventually, even that dried up. Sometimes I'd catch wind of things he said about me. That I stole everything. That I was a backstabber. That I didn't respect blood. But I didn't care. Because respect has to be earned, and Jake spent a lifetime burning bridges and cashing in favors until he ran out of both. Jake had tried to rewrite the end of Dad's story, to erase me from it. But in the end, the truth came through. And now? Now I sit at the kitchen table every morning, coffee in hand, just like Dad used to. Same chair. Same view out the window. Except now, the house is quiet, and the peace is real. Jake got what he deserved. And I got what Dad wanted for me all along. Home. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, it helps more than you know. Subscribe and stick around for more true stories with twists, turns, and just the right amount of karma.